Hello, this is Navid Ahmadi. Welcome to the lesson number 6. Today's lesson is models. Models are very important. And by model, I mean role model, not the models you see on the magazine. It's different meaning. A role model is kind of like a hero. It is someone that has success, the same kind of success that you want. So for example, if you are a basketball player, right? You want to be great. Then maybe Shaquille O'Neal or Michael Jordan is your role model. Maybe both. So it's important to have role models. Role models are people who have done already what you want to do. Why is that important? Well, it's important because you can learn from them. You can learn much faster if you find out, if you discover what they did to succeed. This is the fast track for success. You don't have to make all the same mistakes. You can copy them in a way and learn much faster. So for example, when you want to start a business, in the beginning, you know nothing, zero. You have no experience what to do. You are just a beginner of business. Now you have two choices. You can just try something else, keep trying, making mistakes, failing, try again, right? And maybe you do this if you don't have experience, but you want to succeed faster. That will be a very slow method if you only experiment, if you only try and fail, and try to find everything by your own, right? So of course you want to succeed faster. What you need to do, go and find role models. Go and find other people who are already focused, successful business people. Go read their books, go to their seminars and workshops, and learn everything possible from them. And then use what you learn with your own business. And in this way, you will be able to succeed much faster. You can take all the great strategies that they were using, that they discovered in their lives, maybe with many years. You can take all those great strategies and you can use them in months or in weeks. Well, you can do the same thing with your English learning or with anything. You can find role models, people who are total masters. And you can steal their ideas. You can steal the best ideas, the best strategies, the best methods that they have used. And you can copy them and you will learn much faster. You will make fewer mistakes. So that's why role models are so important. They speed up the learning process. They boost up. They also, of course, give you an emotional boost because you can see, hey, they did it. Somebody already did what I want to do. It proves it's not impossible. It can be done. And I also had a little bit with my own business. I was a little bit scared. I was only an English teacher. I didn't know anything about business. But when I read about all those people who started like me with no knowledge of business, with no money, but they did certain things, those certain actions led to success. Those certain strategies led to success. And I realized if I use the same strategies, I will get the same result, the same success. It's the same with English learning. If you follow the strategies of people who are masters, you will also become a master. Quite simple. So let's talk a little bit. In fact, this is how I developed my teaching system. As a beginning teacher of English, I knew nothing, zero. I went to Turkey and I got a job teaching small children and didn't knew anything about English teaching. I had a degree in social work. I had studied social work in school. And suddenly I needed to teach small children. And I did what most English teachers do. I just grabbed some textbooks and followed the textbooks. And I followed what my boss told me to do. And the result was not so good. And I did this for a few years. And later I changed to teaching adults. And the same thing, I just used some textbooks, this textbook, this textbooks. This school would give me some books to use and I just kind of randomly use different activities from these books. And the results were quite poor. But I began to notice something. I began to notice that a few students in my classes were learning much faster than everybody else. They were doing much better than everybody else. So I was curious. I wanted to be a better teacher. And I thought I need to learn what are these guys doing differently. Why are they different than the other students? So I talked to them, I interviewed them, I constantly asked questions. I was very focused on my best students. What were they doing? And then I focused on the other students. What were they doing? What was the difference? And over time, I began to realize that there were patterns. The best students was always doing similar things. And they were different than what most students were doing. Later, few years later, I went and I continued my education and in master's degree, and I teaching English as a foreign language. And during my studies, during my master's degree program, I began to look for other models. This time I looked for researchers, for scientists who are studying English learning or in general language learning. And I wanted to find out again what were the results, the scientific results that showed which methods were fastest, which methods were best for learning English or for teaching English. My focus, of course, was teaching. And again, I began to find patterns. And the very interesting thing to me, the patterns were the same as what was happening with my best students. So the research were showing the same thing that my students were showing. They were doing exactly the same thing. So from these two models, these role models, these academic role models, these scientists, and then my actual students, my best students, also role models, I learned a totally new way to teach English. And that is what you have now, the English time system, the English time approach. So let me talk about some of these examples and then I will talk in more detail about the importance of finding role models and finding a peer group. Peer means it's a person who is equal to you. But a peer, really, it means it's the people you have contact with every day. Your co-workers, your friends, your business partners, all of these people are your peers. So it's people you have contact with constantly every day. The people you see every day, again and again. Those are your peers. And it's important to have a very good peer group. You need to have a good peer group, and you need to have a good role model. So first, let's talk about the role models. Let's talk about the few success stories, few my best students that I had over the years. So one of my best students, his name was John. He was from India, and he was a student of mine in Turkey. And he learned so much faster than my other students. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. So I began to ask John questions all the time about what he was doing. How did he study English? And I asked my other students the same questions. And I found that number one, John was focused on listening. John did a lot of listening after school. He had an iPod and he was listening to my lessons all the time. He was listening to the podcast. He was listening to the television. Very focused on listening and auditory method. Learning with his ears. Another thing like to do was reading English, but not textbooks. He read novels. Now, in the beginning, he was reading children's novels, very easy novels, but they were storybooks, not textbooks. He read a lot of these. Every day, he just read for fun in English. So he was reading a lot of storybooks and he was listening a lot. Another key thing that John focused on was meaning and interest. In other words, he always chose English materials that were interesting to him, that had meaning to him, for him. Textbooks usually don't have personal meaning, so he chose, oh, this story is interesting, I want to read this book. He was focused on the meaning, he was focused on the story. He was not focused on grammar points or vocabulary. And the same in his listening, he chose listening that was interesting and fun and meaningful to him. So that's interesting. Well, later I talked to a guy named Steve Kaufman. He's a linguist. I think he speaks 12 languages now. He keeps adding languages, so I forget how many he speaks, but the last I talked to him, he was speaking 12 languages. Not bad. He's a Canadian and native English speaker, but he speaks French, he speaks Japanese, Cantonese, and Mandarin. He's learning Russian now, he's learning Korean. He's an amazing guy. And of course, I was very curious about Steve, another great language learning role model. And I asked Steve about his method. How do you do it? And he writes aloud about his method in his blog, in his website. So Steve, guess what? Same as John. Number one, he has a listening approach. He focuses mostly on listening. Probably 80% of his time he spends listening. He learns with his ears. Another thing Steve does, he reads for pleasure. He reads storybooks, he reads articles. He reads magazines. He's reading always for pleasure. He's always focused on something that's interesting to him or meaningful to him. He does not read textbooks. He does not focus on grammar. This is another interesting thing. Steve does not study grammar. He might learn a little bit grammar sometimes, but in general, he focuses on listening and reading for fun, reading for interest. Just like John. Interesting. Well, I began to see these patterns again and again. The superstar learners, the superstar students have the same exact patterns. They are great role models and doing the same things. They seem to be focused always on listening. They like to read for pleasure. They focus their listening and their reading on interesting content, meaningful content, articles, stories, novels, newspapers. Another interesting thing, they never focus on grammar. They may learn a little bit of grammar or not. Some of them was study grammar a little bit. Some never study grammar. But they all focus totally on listening to interesting content, reading interesting content. Input is their focus. Another interesting thing that you find with these superstar students, the superstar learners, is that they do a lot of deep learning. In other words, a lot of repetition. My favorite example is Jerry Dai, a man named Jerry Dai. Well, Jerry was a native Chinese speaker and he moved to Canada and he wanted to have perfect pronunciation. He wanted to sound like a North American. So number one, what did he do? Well, he focused on listening again. Listening. Every day he listened to English. Something else he did very interesting, he learned deeply. It means he took the same article, for example, or the same conversation, he listened to it 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 times. Amazing. The same conversation. Why did he do that? I mean, it sounds crazy. It's very different from what normal students do. Well, because he realized he needed that massive repetition so that he could really learn and absorb all the sounds of English, the patterns of English. He realized that deep learning was more important than going fast and trying to learn a lot of words and a lot of grammar. Now you don't need to do quite so much like Jerry Dai. 500 times with one thing, it is a little bit much. It's a little bit hard to stay motivated. It's kind of boring. But general principle is important. Deep learning. It's something that all superstar students do, that the superstar learners do. They learn a lot very deeply first. So they go deep, a lot of repetition. And then later, they add more. Another guy who does a lot of deep learning is one of my favorite examples in my mini-series, Tiger Woods. You heard a lot about Tiger Woods. Think about Tiger Woods for a minute. Tiger Woods started to practice golf when he was a child. His father taught him golf. And he learned how to putting. he practiced paddling the letter short strokes, and he practiced in a big long stroke driving in golf. Driving, it means hitting it far. The same swing. Tiger Woods has been practicing the exact same swing for years, since he was a child until now. He's a master, but he still practices his swing. I mean, this is super deep learning. He's doing the same simple thing again, and again, each time trying to make a tiny little improvement. Right? Tiger Woods didn't decide, oh, I'm sick of this, I already know this, I don't need to practice anymore. That's what a lot of English learners do. They say, I already know the past tense. I can take a test, I can pass it, no problem. But when they speak, they make constant mistake with the past tense because they did not learn it deeply. They know it at a shallow level. They can take a test, but they don't know it deeply, the way Tiger Woods knows his swing. Because he has done it, I don't know, maybe 50,000 times, 100,000 times, maybe more. So deep learning is something else you can learn from our role models. So what you need to do then is to find role models, and you can get them from a peer group. Peer group means the people you associate with, the people around you, the people you connect to every day. How do you find a peer group of super great English learners, a superstar students? Well, there are different ways to do it, but I think the easiest way to do it is online. I mean, the internet is amazing because you can communicate it with all people all over the world. You can find super English learners in England, in America, in Asia, all over. And you can come together as a group and communicate, learn from each other, and that's going to increase your learning speed so much. It's one reason we call ourselves the English Time Club. The club part is equally important to the lessons. The club part consists of forums and also new member site we are developing, and the purpose is to create a peer group, a group of superstar learners, so that you can connect with people in different parts of the world who are using the same patterns, the same methods, the same systems, and you can learn from them, and so you can learn faster yourself.